We're behind. They're all fired up. What we got to do? First place, our defense has got to go out there and take the ball. Then when we get the ball, we got to have 11 people that's going to do their job and try to score every time you get the football. If we do that, we'll be all right. Do that, we'll be all right.
Welcome back to another episode of Football University here on the CTS Sports Room. I know it's been a while, but we're glad to be back with you all in the student section. Shouts out to Matt Caddell. Listen, we got a lot to catch up on from Alabama, NFL news, Coach Kalen DeBoer, Nick Saban, Tua. The list goes on and on and on. So I'm just glad y'all are here. Welcome to Football University again with me, Matt Caddell, where we talk all things football related from, as I mentioned earlier, NFL, college, and we bring it back to the University of Alabama. So let's get things started real quick. I'm so glad you all are back here. So first topic I want to discuss, I know it's been a couple weeks, but a lot has happened the past couple of days. But listen, we're getting closer and closer to the football season. Yes, the football season. We are 89 days away until kickoff, until Alabama kicks it off versus Western Kentucky in Bryant-Denny. And let's talk about the schedule. Some news that kind of broke recently. You know, the SEC is moving from CBS, which I think a lot of Alabama fans are kind of missing. Roll Tide, Just Stapleton. Yes, we are talking about the Crimson Tide schedule. Some interesting primetime games that are going to kick off. I think Alabama's first three games are all night games. Western Kentucky, South Florida, and then that obviously playing Wisconsin, that Fox noon kickoff in Madison, Wisconsin. But then I think the fifth game, the Georgia game, which is probably one of the biggest games of the year in all of college football, that will be a 6:30 kickoff on ABC. Night game in Bryant-Denny. Kirby, Kalen, Carson Beck, Jalen Milroe, Dogs coming in Tuscaloosa. It's going to be an exciting matchup in college football, especially in the SEC. So, yeah, Alabama, and I believe the South Florida game is a kickoff. I think the South Florida game is a 6 o'clock kickoff as well on ESPN. So, right off the bat, Alabama's getting a lot of primetime games, you know, having to play later in the evening outside of that Cincinnati game. I mean, not Cincinnati, but Wisconsin game. So it's going to be interesting to see how the Crimson Tide rolls this football season. Like I said, we're 89 days away, and I'm so excited. A lot of other news as well. Listen, a lot of the final enrollees just came in. Guys like Ryan Williams, Amari Jefferson, A few of the rest of the 24 class is already on campus, so I'm excited to see these guys. And listen, Josh Pate had a great take regarding Ryan Williams today. He said, listen, I think Ryan Williams will eventually help Alabama this season. I think Ryan, we have so much depth competition. Kalen DeBoer said they addressed needs in the portal. The one thing they didn't need to address in the portal was wide receiver, because I think we're locked and loaded with the amount of guys coming in, looking at Amari Jefferson, Ryan Williams, Rico Scott, those type of guys. Caleb Odom moved from tight end to wide receiver. So you got a plethora of talent to use at the wide receiver position. So I'm excited. But listen, Josh Pate, as I mentioned earlier, he did say wouldn't be surprised if by November Ryan Williams is fully in the rotation. I think it's going to be very exciting to see how we utilize so many different weapons. And the great thing about it, we have Coach Kalen DeBoer, Nick Sheridan as offensive coordinator, Brian Ellis, the former Western Kentucky offensive coordinator, who's our tight end coach. We have so many, and then we have so many offensive-led minds in the offensive room. I think we're going to have an impactful, explosive offense for the Crimson Tide this year. So, like I said, exciting news. So let's get to a few of the comments. Jeff Saban says, roll Tide. Yeah, I think Alabama has thanks for your correction. I believe Alabama has a bye week before playing Georgia, right after they play Wisconsin, going up to Madison, Wisconsin. So, yes, that game in Bryant-Denny, 6:30, ABC. I'm quite sure Chris Fowler, Kirk Herbstreit are going to be on the call, kind of similar to the Texas game last year. So it's going to be a lot of build-up, a lot of hype regarding that game. So it's going to be very interesting to see. Let's go to, I want to get to this real quick. Let's get to a few more. Linda P says, Linda P in the building to have a ride. Roll Tide. Roll Tide, Miss Linda P. RTR, glad to have you here on the show. Belma Stuttermeyer says RTR. Just a lot of different things happening over the course of the year. So listen, and Linda P says 89 days. Yes, 89 days ready for Alabama Crimson Tide, but they better get ready. Yeah, I think Alabama, let's just kind of talk about Alabama. I think right now, I think Alabama's ranked USA Today has Alabama ranked number 7. I've seen ESPN FPI rankings had Alabama ranked as high as number 5, which I think is a really good spot for Alabama. We know we have the 12-team playoff. It's different. I think Georgia's probably going to be the number 1 team preseason ranked, followed by, teams like probably Ohio State, other teams like that. So it's going to be interesting to see. But I think Alabama, to your point, is prized to go in with a chip on their shoulder. They're going to have a lot to prove. They had such a dramatic offseason with Saban retiring, losing the Rose Bowl, Kalen DeBoer losing the Rose Bowl, coming to Alabama. I think he's finally getting his foot settled. The guys are buying in. You look at offseason workouts, which we'll discuss later. The guys look motivated. I mean, Jalen Milroe, for example, he's going to quarterback camps with, Jordan Palmer, working on his QB game. So a lot of the guys working out together, Ty Simpson working out together. So I think this team has going to play with a big chip on their shoulder, really build on that whole length mentality, especially with Kalen DeBoer. And I mentioned earlier, we have an offensive genius, offensive minds in the QB room, in the offensive room to really maximize and have an explosive offense for the Crimson Tide this year. So listen, let's go to the comments. Y'all are, as I like to say, rocking and rolling. Linda P says, RTR lady. Bobby Caddell says, all RTR, glad you're back. Yes, I'm glad to be back. Jeff Saberlin says, yes, I watched the Tides Roll podcast. If you haven't watched it, check it out. And listen, Kobe Prentice. Listen, guys like Kobe Prentice, I believe, was on there a couple of weeks ago. Caleb Odom, the highly talented tight end, now receiver out of Carrollton, Georgia. Him, Juju Lewis, was one of the top quarterbacks this year, who's the USC commit. He talked about his reasoning from coming to the Crimson Tide. He said, listen, he felt like Alabama would better prepare him for life and get him to the next level in the NFL. And as I mentioned earlier, I know I sound like a broken record, but I think Kalen DeBoer, Nick Sheridan, Brian Ellis, having so many offensive guru and minded guys in the with all this talent, I think it's just going to benefit Alabama how explosive they are. Shouts out to Reese McDuffie. Let's get back to the comment section. She says, hi Reese, shouts you out. I know you're a big Eagles fan. All the McDuffies out there, fly Eagles fly. Shouts out to the McDuffie family. Yes. Jeff Stapleton said, yes, Linda, I can't wait. Listen, 89 days, that's pretty close. And we're going to be kicking off football season. I know we had to endure, just waiting on football season. So it's exciting. Reese says, roll tide, roll, back to Reese. Jeff, let's see. Linda P says, roll tide did appear on the Bama Standard. I think he did as well. Listen, yes, Alabama is where legends are made. Speaking of legends, I think Alabama is going to have a legendary year. I really do. I think, like I said, Alabama's playing from a standpoint, having a chip on their shoulder. I mentioned earlier, kickoff starts 89 days away, kicking off versus Western Kentucky in Bryant-Denny, then having the game versus South Florida. Now, we know Alabama fans, we might have a little PTSD coming from last year. It got me thinking, I wonder if the players knew that if it was Saban's last year, would they have really better prepared more in the Rose Bowl? I don't think they probably would have wasted it away. I think they would have tried to get it for, head coach Nick Saban. But, that's just a question that kind of hit my mind. But one reason we kind of got to the Rose Bowl was us overcoming adversity, going to Tampa, playing the South Florida Bulls. They have an explosive offense. Their head coach is from the Josh Heupel UT coaching tree, and he's very explosive. But like I said, Alabama has a lot of, I guess you want to say, PTSD regarding the South Florida game. And I think, listen, I mentioned earlier, Alabama playing with a chip on their shoulder, really buying into that Lank mentality. Listen, I think we need to not only win this game, but we need to kind of put up some points, kind of to alleviate the bad feelings we had versus playing South Florida last year down there in Tampa. Remember, it was raining, it was crazy. They had to postpone the game. Alabama came out. We started with Tyler Buckner, and then Ty Simpson got the start. Jalen Milroe was benched. I think we won't have those issues. But I think that adversity helped propel the Tide throughout the year to finish, in the college football playoff, playing against Michigan, the eventual national champion in the Rose Bowl. So, like I said, I think it's going to be a legendary year. I think Alabama has a lot of potential to quite possibly get in the college football playoff. So it's going to be exciting to see. So let's get to a few more comments. Linda B says, Jeff, Kobe is from my hometown, Calera, I believe. Yeah, shouts out to Calera. Yeah, he was a stud in Calera football. Let's see Jeff Stapleton's comment. Kobe talked about last year leaving a bad taste in the team's mouth. Yeah, I think, obviously losing to Texas, that was adverse. And then obviously losing to Michigan in the Rose Bowl. I think that dynamic coupled with, you got Coach Kalen DeBoer, this guy, I think he gets it. I think he's all about, he's kind of process like Coach Saban, always looking ahead, always thinking about the team. How can I help encourage these guys, improve these guys mentally, psychologically, physically. Um, I think it's going to be interesting to see. So, like I said, I think Alabama is going to be looking to prove all naysayers wrong again this year, kind of buying into that Lank mantra or mentality for sure. Then the piece says she's talking trash already. She said her coworkers hate to see her in the office. Listen, when you're an Alabama fan, I feel like everybody comes because Alabama is at the epicenter of college football. It's kind of like the Lakers in basketball or the Yankees in baseball or in the South, the Braves, whatever you want to say. Um, because Alabama is always at the epicenter of college football, and that's all we do is 24/7, 365 college football. You're going to have SEC rivals. Obviously, Auburn fans are going to be coming at you. You got ball fans you have to deal with if you work in Tennessee. You got Georgia fans that you got to deal with. LSU fans. You got so many different fan bases that are always coming at your neck as an Alabama fan. So you kind of always have to always be ready to, talk a little trash and let them know that the Alabama's going to be rolling this year. And like I said, I think that's going to go to the mantra this year and Alabama having, playing with the chip on their shoulder, having that type of, let all naysayers know mentality just because, like I said earlier, I think the highest they got Alabama ranked is number 5. So it's going to be interesting to see how they really have played that maybe more for an underdog role, having to, not be the number 1 team, which I always love. Me personally, I love when Alabama's not ranked number 1. I like when Alabama's ranked number 1 towards the end of the year, holding that trophy, that national championship trophy. But throughout the year, Coach Saban did so well, Alabama having to, always be that targeted team. You're already that targeted team, because you're Alabama. Everybody wants to beat you. You're 9 times out of 10, you're always the opposing team's Super Bowl. Whenever Alabama travels, it's usually the biggest game on the road. It'll happen this year when Alabama goes to Tennessee. Obviously, that's already a big rivalry. Going to LSU, that's going to be the big game. Alabama having to go to Wisconsin early in the year is going to be a big game. Alabama going to Oklahoma. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see how Alabama handles and proves everybody wrong this year. So speaking of Alabama and the SEC, let's shift gears to my next topic. Speaking of the SEC, the schedule, I mentioned Alabama was playing Oklahoma. The SEC had their SEC meeting in Destin, Florida this past week, having to, and it was kind of an introduction to Texas, Oklahoma, finally joining the SEC. I mean, you saw Kalen DeBoer down there, talking with Sark and some of the other coaches down there in the SEC meetings down in Destin, Florida. I wish I was there at the beach. But listen, I think that was kind of the SEC's. I saw Greg Sankey tweet out the new SEC logo encompassing with the, with Texas and Oklahoma. And I got to say, the SEC meeting, kind of one of the biggest stories. Kalen DeBoer spoke highly of the guys training, working in the offseason. I kind of alluded to Jalen Milroe earlier in the show, talking to him working with Ty Simpson and some other guys. But I think what was interesting, in my opinion, Greg Sankey, Alabama now has 14 teams. Biggest news that they made it official that there will be no divisions this year. So it's kind of like the NFL. The top 2 teams will go on to play in the SEC championship. I'm quite sure those teams will probably finish in the top 4, 5, or 6 in the college football 12-team playoff. Quite sure they'll get buys first round or 2. But I will say this, that Texas and Oklahoma coming in, they were on the Feinbaum show. some of the ADs, talking about, the Red River rivalry. And, one thing that kind of got rubbed a lot of Alabama fans the wrong way, where they were saying that the Red River rivalry is the greatest rivalry in college football, which, it is what it is. But I have to disagree on that. I feel like, they're not interstate rivalries. Now they are, border state rivalries. And he was, I think the AD at Texas, we were referring to how, they played the College State there. I played in that stadium playing Texas Tech. And, it's just a big event. He's saying, oh, they have 300,000 people outside, which I get that. But to me, the Red River rivalry is only one day, one game. And to me, what separates the Iron Bowl rivalry is it's 24/7, 365. Like, because 9 times out of 10, Alabama Auburn fans have to live with each other. You got coworkers, you got family members, you got church members that are Auburn fans. Everybody is intrigued with the Alabama Auburn rivalry. You have bragging rights, and this is year round. So I kind of want to discuss that rivalry. And, what teams of the new teams, will it be Texas or Oklahoma, do you think Alabama will have the new rivalry with? Will it be with Oklahoma, with Texas? I know we played Texas the past 2 years. Those were some big-time games. Alabama's had history playing with Oklahoma. We go to Oklahoma this year. Will it be kind of the new rivalry? Which one will be the new rivalry? Will it be Oklahoma, Alabama? That could have something interesting, which it'll be interesting to see having these two teams in the SEC. What will kind of be Alabama's new rivalry moving forward. So, yeah, that was just some of the news that came out of the SEC spring meetings down there in Destin. But yeah, so let's get to a few of the comments. Let's see what you all are talking about. Let's see. Anitra is saying 98 more days. I think it's 89 more days ready for some football. Yes, it's definitely 89 more days. Let's go Jeff Stapleton. He says, UGA losing Bowers is bigger letdown than UGA fans think. Now, UGA, they have a lot of depth at the tight end room. Now, I will say they did, they have dealt the tight end. He kind of filled in for Brock Bowers. He's a really good tight end, dealt there. And then I think they got one of the top transfer tight ends from Stanford to really help with the depth position. Now, that's going to be interesting. Now, my thing is with Georgia, they lost Ladd McConkey. To me, I think the McConkey loss might be a bit. The Bowers loss is huge, but I think Grant Delp is his name. He's a capable tight end. He got so much experience the past two years. I've seen him come in and fill in for Bowers. He's more than capable. And then they got the top transfer, who's probably going to be one of the top tight ends coming in from Stanford, the tight end transfer out the portal going to Georgia. So I think they have the tight end. That's why I think the Ladd McConkey, I think Bowers is going to hurt most definitely. Maybe teams' defenses are a little bit more aggressive, but don't sleep on Delp and that tight end from Stanford. But I think the Ladd McConkey loss might be a little bit more challenging, just the way how effective of a route runner he was, how he could stretch the field on the outside, inside the slot. He did a lot. So it'll be interesting to see how, Georgia, obviously they have a lot of talent. Kirby comes from Saban, so he knows how to recruit and have depth. But Ladd McConkey, man, he was, second round receiver going to the LA Chargers. So that's a bit different. So it'll be interesting to see how Georgia looks. And, this year, speaking of Georgia, I feel like Georgia, they don't have the luxury of being babied in the SEC. They got to play a real schedule, probably for the first time in years. They're not having to go play 7 games of cupcakes and finally play a tough team in October and November. They don't have that luxury anymore. They start off with Clemson. They got to come to Alabama week 4. They got to go to Texas. They got to play Ole Miss. So they're no longer baby. It's going to be interesting to see how, they handle having a tough schedule. They got Carson back, coming back, Etienne. Yeah, that's all good, but that looked good when you're playing, cupcake SEC schedule out on the East, playing Vanderbilt, Kentucky, Missouri, playing Tennessee, Florida. Listen, it's going to be interesting to see. So I think it's going to be a lot more challenging for Georgia, knowing they will probably come out with the preseason #1 ranking, and everybody's going to be gunning for them this year. Listen, they got some tough road games, and I think they were probably the ones who hurt the most from this SEC expansion, because when we had divisions, they always had it made on the SEC East. Say what you want to say, but listen, Georgia's always had it so much easier on the SEC East and play it. That's why their road to the SEC championship is always so much easier. Florida's been down. Tennessee's been there on the up and coming. Kentucky, Vanderbilt, Missouri, South Carolina's not been that great. So it's been a lot easier for them when Alabama's had to go. Lane Kiffin, Ole Miss, LSU, having to play a tough Iron Bowl, having to go to Texas A&M. So the road for Alabama has always been a lot more challenging. And I think with this SEC expansion, to your point about Georgia, losing Bowers, losing McConkey, their schedule is a lot more tougher. They're going to have to manage. I know a lot of people got them going undefeated. Listen, going to Texas, going to Ole Miss, that's going to be a lot different. Then having to go to Tuscaloosa. So it's going to be interesting to see how they manage that. But enough about the Bulldogs. I don't want the Bulldog fans to get upset with me. But let's get back to the Crimson Tide for sure. Let's see what y'all are saying. I know. I know y'all are going. As soon as I mention Georgia, I know everybody wants to discuss about Georgia. Oh man, that's why I love the student section. Jeff Saban says, yeah, he's doubling down on Brock Bowers. Was the go-to guy when they couldn't make a big play. Yak plays Matt. Yeah, I agree. Brock Bowers was that guy. He was kind of that safety blanket for Carson Beck. But he kind of got injured last year. I think he missed 3 or 4 games. McConkey. I'm just saying, I don't know who's going to. I think when they have Delp behind him, Delp is a more than capable tight end. The other tight end, the transfer from Stanford, he's more than capable as well. I think they can, they can handle that depth. My reason is I don't know who they replaced Ladd McConkey. I don't know any receivers in Georgia's room outside of Ladd McConkey for the past 2 years. That's all I'm saying. I don't know what they do recruiting wise. So that could have potentially put a lot of, offer some challenges for them offensively. Mike Bobo. Their offensive playbook is kind of the same, run, explosive, McConkey, Bauer. So to your point, it's going to hurt. So I agree with that point. Joe Saban says, I'm glad Ladd McConkey and Bowers is gone too. Yeah, I agree. They were tough to handle for sure. But as the tide rolls and rises, we were able to beat Georgia to get in the college football playoff last year. Linda P, I knew as soon as I started saying Georgia, Bama fans was ready to bring that smoke. Linda P says, UGA is going to Stanford. You got assaulted with Bama spanking them. Listen, Georgia's got a lot now. It's going to be a challenge. They're going to be the preseason ranked #1 team. Luckily, we got them in Tuscaloosa. Now, with the expanded college football playoff, I mentioned Georgia having their type of, schedule this year is no more a cupcake feast, as Linda P says. It will no longer be a cupcake feast, especially with the addition of Texas and Oklahoma. No more divisions. They got to play tough games for sure. But at the same time, Alabama playing Georgia in Tuscaloosa. It gives having the 12-team playoff. I think possibly Alabama, if Georgia does well, Alabama does well, they could easily be the top two teams play each other in the SEC championship. So they could meet up twice. Then let's say the 12-team playoff, they both make it. Alabama and Georgia could possibly play each other 2 to 3 times this year. So it'll be interesting to see how teams manage that playbook wise. It'll be more of a kind of be like an NBA playoffs. Instead of having a game 7, having to play a best of 3 if you have to play multiple teams for the conference to win the national championship. So it'll be interesting to see how they manage that. So let's go. Just say what it says. I'll be shocked to the MUT system. Linda P says they had a cupcake buffet. I mean, it is what it is. They did. Now they on the flip side, they were able to win 2 national championships, but it is what it was. Listen, Jeff Stapleton he's standing on hard on this Georgia time. He says the only reason Beck had 4,000 yards was after the catch. Yak YAC is another term for yards after catch. You look at Alabama's receivers, guys who were great at Yak, Jalen Waddle. Speaking of the Miami Dolphins, Tyreek Hill, those are your Yaks. As soon as they catch the ball, they're able to get, in addition, plus yardage. That's what you call yards after catch. But great comment, great point. Jeff Saban said there's some nasty defenses coming out their back. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. So we mentioned 89 days to kick off. We mentioned Bama. We mentioned the schedule times. We mentioned Alabama's preseason ranks. I mentioned kind of alluded this about Alabama. Mentioned the SEC meetings, DeBoer, some of his comments, SEC expansion. Kind of want to go back to Bama's offseason workouts. You got guys like Jalen Milroe, who I've said time and time on this show, if he continues to develop, get with the quarterback coach, he's working with Jordan Palmer, who trains some of the NFL guys. I think that's going to help him. And he's working with guys like Ty Simpson. Ty Simpson and Jalen Milroe have been working out together. Team has been working out together, whether it's all the offensive linemen going to a training facility with some of the running backs. Listen, Alabama's Kalen DeBoer mentioned talking about the continuity. I think the guys reported last week officially for summer workouts. You take summer school and all that stuff. So they're going to be doing a lot of stuff on their own, 707 on their own, all that good stuff. But the continuity, the off-season workouts, seeing guys constantly improve, working on their craft. Listen, you're looking at the offensive linemen working together. I mean, these guys seem to be all about protecting the team. I know that's one of Kalen DeBoer's mantra, but looking at the off-season workouts, looking at Justice Haynes putting in work, Richard Young, who was massive, Jahad Campbell. I mean, the list goes on and on. I mentioned Milroe, Kobe Prentice, Ryan Williams. I've seen videos of it. These guys are locked and loaded, and they are ready to really prove everybody wrong this season with their work, the continuity, building that, protecting the team, having that brotherhood, that Lank mentality, and pushing each other. I think that's what's going to help Alabama for sure this offseason. So we mentioned the offseason, mentioned SEC's expansion. Let's get to a few comments before I get to my next topic. I want to play Michigan, but they're probably on probation. It'll be interesting to see. Let's discuss this 12-team playoff. I think the SEC probably gets now with the expansion of the 12-team playoff and SEC expansion. I know a lot of people who voted on this think you're going to get more Cinderellas into the 12-team playoffs. I actually think having 12 teams makes it harder for teams that are Cinderellas, maybe some of your group of 5 schools, like a TCU was. I think it's going to be actually harder. You look at the SEC, look at how many teams are in the top 25. I think SEC probably has about 9. You take the first half of those, they're probably going to get half of those spots. You look at the Big Ten with the addition of USC, UCLA, and Oregon. Look at Oregon's probably going to be in there. USC, possibly, Ohio State, Michigan. So you look at them probably getting what, another half, four out of the Big 12. I mean, the Big 10, you probably get 4 spots. Ohio State, Oregon probably would be there. USC possibly. Michigan, I don't know. I think they lost a lot, plus losing Jim Harbaugh. So you look at the Big 10, that's 3 teams. That's already 9. So you got four spots left. I mean, you got to look. Is it a Clemson? Is it a FSU? Who one team for the SEC, maybe 1 or 2 teams for the ACC, maybe a Miami. And then the Big 12 teams, maybe like a Colorado, possibly. So you kind of, I think you won't have those group of 5 teams. I think you're just going to have just enough from the big conferences. The SEC probably taking the bulk, 4 to 6 teams. I think the Big 10 probably gets maybe 4 teams in this year. 3, I'm maybe saying 3, Ohio State, Oregon, possibly USC, maybe Penn State, maybe could be another team. And then you look at the ACC, maybe get 1 or 2 teams, and the Big 12. So I think the stats for group of 5 teams getting in is not going to be what most people think, that, oh, we're expanding the 12-team playoff. It's not like the NCAA basketball tournament, March Madness, where you have a Gonzaga come out of nowhere, or a Seton Hall come out of nowhere, or Loyola Marymount. None of these small schools are just going to hop into the playoff. I think now that you expanded with the expansion of the SEC and the Big Ten, the ACC, Pac-12, all these teams, it's going to be that much more difficult for those group of 5 schools to get into the top 5. Because if you look at the SEC alone, I mean, a 2-loss SEC team, possibly 3-loss SEC team is probably going to get that 11th, 12th spot for sure. Just because of the strength of schedule, who they lost to, SEC having so many ranked teams in the top 10, top 25, whatever you want to say. So it's going to be interesting to see how that dynamic plays out. Let's get to a few comments. Joe Stapleton says, our O-line did help Milrose's stats last year. I mean, just watching last year, I was just looking at not only the O-line, but just looking at the low snaps. I mean, Seth McLaughlin, like Milroe had to do it. By the time he's coming up, he's wasted a second and a half, and you only get about 2-3 seconds in the pocket for a quarterback. So it's a lot you have to process. So I think having Parker Bressler, the highly talented center out of the University of Washington, transfer to Tuscaloosa, I think that's going to help, as well as having under the leadership guidance of Coach Kaplovich. Heard from guys like Jaden Robinson saying this guy is real deal when it comes to offensive line technique. I thought the offensive line looked the most improved in A-Day from the short period of time. I mean, I thought the defensive line was just going to manhandle, but they were able to hold their own. So interesting to see. Cedric Caddell says, RTR. Jeff Stapleton says, do you think Saban will be in the Coaches Hall of Fame? Yes, of course. Not only, I'm glad y'all, that's why I love the student section. Y'all brought me to my next topic. Coach Saban is on the ballot for the College Football Hall of Fame. Of course, I think he's first ballot Hall of Famer. Just his impact on college football, impact on recruiting, how everybody had to step their game up because of Coach Saban, even when he was at LSU. So winning that championship at LSU, winning 6 at the University of Alabama, of course, I think it should be he should be a shoe-in. They shouldn't even have to have a vote for him. But you got to go in through the process. But yeah, definitely Coach Saban deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. And not only is it Coach Saban in the ballot for the Hall of Fame, you got Mark Ingram, Heisman Trophy winner. He's on the ballot as well. And I think somebody who should have already been in the Hall of Fame, College Football Hall of Fame, Chris Samuels. Chris Samuels was like number 2, number 3 overall draft pick out of Alabama. Massive offensive lineman coming out of the University of Alabama. Had such a long career with the Washington Redskins, who are now the Commanders. He's on the Hall of Fame ballot as well. But listen, you look at Alabama's history, Alabama's pedigree, the amount of talent that's come through Tuscaloosa, you could put whoever in there. Shouts out to my good friend, Lucian. He says it should be like 35 Bama players in there, no cap. I mean, I agree. You could put so many. You can put all of our Heisman Trophy winners. You can put guys like Tua. I mean, the list goes on and on and on when it comes to Alabama and the Hall of Fame. But me personally, I think Coach Saban is the first ballot. I think Ingram deserves, and don't sleep on Chris Samuels. I remember watching him growing up, him playing under DuBose and all those guys. He was the real deal Holyfield when it comes to offensive line. He set the tone for Alabama, really having really, really dominant offensive line on the collegiate level, as well as a professional level. I want to say he set the tone. I think John Hanna, the legendary All-American, Hall of Famer, who played with the New England Patriots, he set the tone for Alabama having an offensive dominant line. And I feel like Chris Samuel continued that tradition here at Alabama. So I think he deserves, if I'm on the ballot, I'm voting for all 3 of them, if, ands, and the buts. And no ifs, ands, and buts. This is what he's. But Coach Saban, I think he's a shoe-in, in my opinion. Just his impact on college football alone. So great comment there from my good friend, excuse me, Lucian. Yeah, I think Jeff Saban, you're referring to our defensive line. Yeah, I think our defensive line, LT Overton is going to be a stud. Shouts out to Roll Tide and Rise Up, Roll Tide peeps. Listen, speaking of the NFL, we're going to get into a good NFL conversation. Let's see. I love the chat. Y'all are amazing. So let's get to the NFL since we're discussing the NFL. A lot of news has happened the past couple weeks. Let's start with probably the biggest Alabama news. We know NFL teams are going to OTAs. OTAs mean for other team activities in the NFL. But listen, the biggest news I believe that happened the past couple weeks, Jalen Waddle signing a big year, getting paid. Devontae Smith got paid a couple weeks prior to that with the Philadelphia Eagles. And I mentioned how Howie Roseman, smart GMs, know how to get it ahead of the curve, pay those guys good money where they don't have to set the market and break the bank. Excuse me, i.e. what Jerry Jones is going to have to do with CeeDee Lamb. Now that Justin Jefferson signed a major contract with the Minnesota Vikings, but shouts out to Jalen Waddle for signing a big-time deal. That just, to me, shows you Bama is what NFL U, especially wide receiver U. Not, you can make the case for LSU as well, but Jerry Jeudy got paid, Devontae Smith got paid, and now Jalen Waddle with the Miami Dolphins gets a 3-year deal, $84 million, about 84, almost $85 million guaranteed. I mean, $85 million over 3 years, but he gets $76 million guaranteed at signing. So shouts out to Jalen Waddle. I mean, he deserves it. It's going to be interesting to see how, who's next? I think they had to take care of Waddle, the Miami Dolphins. I think from what I've heard from Chris Greer, some NFL insiders, I think Tua's going to be the next quarterback to get paid. I think he's probably going to get a 4-year, 4 to 5 year, $200 million contract deal. Now, I don't know if it'll be as high as Justin Herbert's or Joe Burrows, or maybe not even Jalen Milroe, but I do think it probably will be somewhere on par with the Jared Goff contract that just signed. Jared Goff just signed with the Detroit Lions. And speaking of Tua, talking about Law, he was able to be, like I mentioned earlier, talking about the NFL, a lot of teams are starting OTAs or whatnot. Tua was in attendance at OTAs. I think he did some stuff for a charity. I know he was at Coach Saban's golf tournament for Nick's kids, him and Mark Ingram. But listen, Tua had a new look where he shaved all his hair, facial hair on his face, and people were like, who was that? So interesting to see how new look Tua, does he leave it off? Is it an off-season thing, or, is it maybe a new look Tua? But I do think Tua is going to be the next quarterback to get that massive deal. So shouts out to Jalen Waddle getting paid, Devontae Smith, Jerry Jeudy. Listen, so I mentioned a lot of OTAs. I think Tua is going to be the next guy getting paid. So speaking of the NFL and talking about OTAs, some clips of some guys playing. You saw Jalen Hurts at practice, Devontae Smith, obviously with the Eagles. Fly Eagles fly to all the Eagles fans, the McDuffie family, Reese. Shouts out to the Eagles. But listen, the biggest story I think that everybody was kind of broke the internet for a second was everybody seeing Derrick Henry finally in his Baltimore Ravens uniform working OTAs with the Baltimore Ravens, and Lamar Jackson still's got the 22. He's in the purple and gold. He's no longer in Nashville. And, I think in that division, in that AFC North division, that is going to be the most competitive division, in my opinion, here at Football University. That's why NFL ranks toughest division. You got the Ravens, Lamar Jackson. You got the Bengals, Joe Burrow, Deshaun Watson. And you got Russell Wilson with the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I think that's the toughest division as of right now. But seeing Derrick Henry in the purple and gold, Ravens flock, it was that kind of broke the internet. Lamar Jackson talked about how he's running plays with Derrick Henry, how he's such a fan, excuse me, of watching Derrick Henry run the ball, just in OTAs. But seeing Derrick Henry in the purple and gold, I think. Listen, Lamar Jackson, they got to the AFC Championship last year. I think they can make things happen with a lot with, Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry in the backfield, Zay Flowers on the outside. It'll be interesting. The Miami Dolphins. The Ravens probably could be the favorites for the AFC, especially if they win that division. They were in the AFC Championship last year. When the playoffs come, you got to watch out for Patty Mahomes, regardless. Him and Andy Reid and Kelsey, they get that secret sauce when it comes to the playoffs. But, yeah, I think they could easily be the favorites. And speaking of the NFL, Derrick Henry, the Baltimore Ravens, let's take a pause, get to a few comments. Cameron Caddell says, Lamar and Derrick is going to be epic. I agree. I think it's going to be epic, to your point, in that backfield. It got me thinking about, some of the top backfields. I mentioned earlier, Jalen Hurts in OTAs showed him side by side with Saquon Barkley. I mean, what's the more explosive backfield? Is it Lamar and Henry or Jalen and Saquon? I'm going to have to go Lamar and Henry just because, Lamar's a two-time MVP. Derrick Henry should have won MVP. You can't, two Heisman Trophy winners in the same backfield. You can't beat that. And the style, the system that they run, they like to run the ball. So, yeah, that is going to be interesting. Let's see what Jeff Stapleton says. He mentioned that the Niners said Brandon Ayuk contract is getting close to happening too. Like I said, I think smart NFL GMs like Chris Greer at the Miami Dolphins, like Howie Roseman at the Philadelphia Eagles, instead of waiting to pay guys big money, go ahead and pay these guys a really competitive salary. That way you can keep these guys longer. And then if you want to extend them, you can extend them. That's what Howie Roseman did with Devontae Smith. Got him sold up for the next 4 years. Chris Greer went ahead and signed Jalen Waddle, 84 million, 76 guaranteed. Mentioned Justin Jefferson. Now set the market. I think he's getting what, $35 million a year. I think a 4-year deal for the Minnesota Vikings. Now I think he became the highest non-quarterback player in NFL history. To me, that goes back to Jerry Jones and the Dallas Cowboys. I think you're really going to have to shell out even more money. You're probably going to have to get CD at probably 34, 33 million. If not, he could want more. So I think Jerry Jones, the Cowboys, got to play. Instead of playing this waiting game, you could have went ahead and paid him before Justin Jefferson set the market. And you got to think, Jamar Chase is going to want to get paid. So the longer Jerry Jones waits to pay CeeDee Lamb, the worse, the higher the check is going to have to be for him to pay CeeDee Lamb. So I just think smart GMs know how to take care of those guys favorable with a decent amount of money and set the tone, get the ball running, get your guys signed up, pay them a nice, abundant contract without having to set the market. So to your point, Brandon Ayuk, I think he's going to get a big time contract, but I don't think it's going to be. I think it's probably going to be more comparable to. I think it's going to be like a 3-year deal. I don't think it's going to be as high as Devontae or Jalen Waddles, but I think it's going to be comparable. I think he gets a really good, favorable deal. I think Shanahan and Lynch, they take care of Brandon Ayuk. I think he means so much to, obviously, Brock Purdy and the 49ers offense. So I think they get a big deal. If not, they'll trade him. Maybe they try to get T. Higgins from the Cincinnati Bengals, who got franchise tag. So it's just one thing about the NFL, it is a business. I think that's the biggest thing I learned about my brief stint in the NFL. It's all about money and contracts. So, and who can evaluate talent. So let's stay in the student section. Lushan, my good friend, said 2 million new QB running back duos. I say Hurts and Barkley just because that's a major question mark. We know what King Henry gonna do, but if Saquon can get back, Eagles are winning the Super Bowl. Wow, bold take from Lushan. Listen. I think to your point, I think also, Lushan, it falls on who the offensive coordinator is for the Philadelphia Eagles. Flying the spot. They got A.J. Brown. They lost Jason Kelsey, the center. They got to replace that. But they got the Jeff Stoutland, the offensive line. He's one of the best offensive line, if not the best offensive line coach in the NFL. Ties from Alabama. Like I said, they got Saquon. They got Hurts. Now you got to figure out who's the offensive coordinator. Nick Sirianni, the head coach. He's kind of an offensive guy. But I think they got Kellen Moore, the former Cowboys offensive coordinator for a couple of years back. He was with the Chargers, I believe, last year. Now he's up there in Philadelphia with the Eagles. So it'll be interesting to see how he runs his offense. Is his offense going to look more like, Dak Prescott? Is going to be a little bit more RPO, zone attack. It's going to be interesting to see. But to your point, the Eagles, I do got the Eagles winning that division, so that's going to be an interesting division. I think the Washington Commanders are a couple years out, even though they got Dan Quinn, the new head coach, Jane Daniels running the offense. I still think you got Brian Robinson at running back. So, I still think I think the Commanders probably fit third. I think the weakest link is the New York Giants, in my opinion. Brian Daboll, they signed Daniel Jones at this crazy amount of money. They got Malik Neighbors, a good draft pick. But in order to win that division, I think you got to beat Dallas or Philadelphia. And I think Dallas won it last year. I wouldn't be surprised if Philly wins it this year with Jalen Hurts. Speaking about the NFL, great comment there, Lushawn. Going back to OTAs, Calvin Ridley with the new team, new look, new jersey. They showed some OTA clips of him in Tennessee, Nashville. He's looking smooth as ever, running routes. Calvin Ridley always been one of the top route runners to me that ever come out of Alabama. Just pure route running, so smooth. A technician when it comes to route running. He's looking good. And another viral video today, Mac Jones is with Jacksonville. They showed him running through some drills, which is kind of interesting. Mac Jones, new face, obviously. And a bit of great news, John Mechie, he's won the George Halas Award winner for him overcoming leukemia, fighting cancer, and being able to, overcome that. This past year, he won the George Halas Award. But him in OTAs catching passes from C.J. Stroud, shouts out to Will Anderson, D'Amico Ryans, head coach. John Mechie looking like he's going to have a big year. I've seen some clips of him looking back to when he was back at Bama, when him and Devontae were just eating up secondary. So it's going to be interesting to see. I wouldn't be surprised Mechie has a big-time year. Tank Dell, I think he's recovering from an injury or whatnot. I think he might have got injured in a shooting in Florida or something like that. So I won't be surprised John Mechie getting a lot of the reps. Obviously, Nico Collins got paid. The talented receiver went to Michigan, played at Clay Chalkwood High School in Birmingham. But I wanted to show John Mechie some love. He's looking good. And speaking of NFL, Bryce Young, they showed him at OTAs. Bryce Young looks a lot more like he put on more muscle. He's like he finally had a true offseason and focus on his body. And Bryce Young looks like he's bulked up, put on a lot more muscle. I think that's going to be huge for him in that Carolina offense up in Charlotte. So I want to shout out Bryce Young. And speaking of the NFC South, let's go to the Saints, who Bryce is going to play twice. We mentioned how I love to see Bryce versus Kool-Aid this year. Kool-Aid just signed his rookie contract, 4-year deal, $9 million, 3.4 guaranteed. So shouts out to Kool-Aid. Speaking of the NFL, I got to shout this out. Najee Harris had this viral video of him going after Edwards, running back from Georgia, working on ball security drills, punching out the ball or whatnot. And he's just talking about how he hates Georgia. Georgia's trash and get this weak stuff out of here. I thought that was a cool viral clip from Najee Harris taking shots at the Georgia Bulldogs. Sort of how you all guys do it. So before we get off, I want to discuss this. We mentioned the NFL. Talking about Jalen Hurts and the Philadelphia Eagles, Lushawn, the NFL schedule release came out about 3 weeks ago, and we didn't get to discuss it. But the one who's got the most interesting schedule, I mentioned Bryce Young. Bryce Young's got an interesting schedule this year. I'm going to say week 1, he's got to go to New England, pay the Patriots, Drake May. That's going to be an interesting matchup. But week 2, he's got to play Aaron Rodgers and the New York Jets in Carolina. That's going to be interesting. And he's got to go to Buffalo and play Josh Allen. So Bryce Young's got some pretty interesting use. Week 1, he's playing the Saints. Sorry, excuse me. That was preseason. Forgive me. Week 1 at Saints. I think that could be, he can maybe get that game. Chargers, week 2, playing against Justin Herbert. But then week 4, he's got to play Joe Burrow. So we get Joe Burrow versus Bryce Young, 2 Heisman Trophy winners colliding. Then week 5, he's playing Caleb Williams, another at Chicago, another Heisman Trophy clash. So, and then he's got to play the Commanders when he's playing against another Heisman Trophy clash with Jaden Daniels. So, even at Broncos, not Heisman Trophy, but going against Bo Nix. So Bryce Young, and then he's got week 12 playing against Patrick Mahomes in Carolina. Be interested to see Bryce Young versus Patrick Mahomes. So, and then week 14, they play the Eagles in Philadelphia. Bryce Young versus Jalen Hurts. Listen, I think Bryce Young is going to be on a lot of, if the Panthers can get it rolling, but Bryce Young's got a lot of QB matchups with either former Heisman Trophy finalists or winners or the top quarterbacks in the league. Looking at Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, all those guys. He's playing the Cowboys. Dak Prescott. He's playing Kyler Murray. So the list goes on and on for Bryce Young. So we're going to end it there, right there. Thank you all for the student section. You all in the chat, Football University chat. You guys did an amazing job. Shouts out to Jeff Stapleton, Linda P., M. Davis, Cameron Caddell, Lushawn, my good friend, Lori Caddell, Reese McDuffie, Anitra, Cedric Caddell, Roll Tide and Rise Up. Shouts out to all the Falcons fans. You guys were amazing. Bobby Caddell, listen, thank you all. I know it's been a minute, but we'll be back next week for another show, same channel, same time here on CTS-Sports Room to kick off your Monday evenings and your week talking about football. Tell a friend, tune in next week. I look forward to you all having an amazing, blessed week. See you all next week. Have a good one. Peace.